Hi everybody, welcome to our latest live video. So today is something slightly different. We're on our usual social media platforms on Facebook, on LinkedIn and Twitter, but we're also on the ABL Facebook page as well. So as you can see on screen, we are here with Liz from ABL, and I'll get her to introduce herself in a minute. But if people do have any comments and questions as we go through, please do put them in the boxes, and we'll try our best to answer them either now or later if we don't know the answer. But we'll definitely try our best to answer any questions you have. And today we're going to be talking all about commercial finance world, but more specifically with Liz about what she does in terms of building partnerships with other organisations. So enough from me. I'll hand it over to Liz if you want to kind of introduce yourself, Liz, and what you do, and then we can jump into some questions.
I will do. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for giving us this opportunity today as well. So a little bit about myself. So I joined ABL on the 1st of September this year. So very, very new to the role, and I've joined as their partnership manager. Primarily to help with the partnerships and working with the business advisors that we work with who connect our businesses to the finance team, and working more together with people like yourselves on events, networking, mentoring, webinars, and just basically make sure that we're wrapping around businesses and giving them the support and the tools that they need from early stages right up the way to mergers and acquisitions and equity funding. A little bit about myself then and where I've sort of come from. So I did about 13 years at Santander. So some people do know me from the Work Cafe, which is where I was there most recently. Did about 7 years in corporate and commercial, and then found myself in January of this year facing redundancy, and decided to take redundancy. And it was more of a natural progression I was looking for. I felt like the banking platform had come quite restricted, and effectively some of the products and processes and the risk attitude towards businesses and the SMEs and larger businesses that we're working with weren't getting the full support that they were looking for. And things became restricted, and it got to a point where we weren't able to offer them anymore. And this is more of a natural progression where ABL has access to the full market of finance. And it became quite clear when I joined in September that actually there's so much more that we can do for businesses. There's so much more we can help with. And it's not just a kind of one box fits all. And it all depends on obviously what the business is looking for. But we don't kind of look at it in a way of a business comes for a loan, they go away with it. We actually ask them what their problem is and what they're looking to solve. And that's what we work on, as opposed to, do you want to come into the bank and take a bank account and go away kind of thing.
No, that's thank you, Liz. I mean, for people who don't know, me and Liz probably have quite similar backgrounds in many ways in working in corporate banking and then coming out in other areas of commercial finance. So yeah, obviously you've given some great insight into your background there. So you talked about partnerships. So your role is developing partnerships. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that and the kind of type of people that you're working with and the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. So we work with advisors on their businesses who we respect, who share our values, and who offer a human element to the commercial finance market. Our clients, we don't class as a transaction, so you'll never see ABL describing working with introducers as a deal done, like you will see, for example, on LinkedIn. We work with business advisors, financial directors, and managing directors whose businesses don't necessarily wake up in the morning and think, oh, I need invoice finance today. But what we do is we work with them and think we need to scale. And then we talk to them about the problems and how we can solve it together. And the things that we recognise is that instead of talking about technical problems and technical products and types of finance, we work with our advisors and we lead with results and benefits as opposed to features. So we understand that each business has a person behind them, an individual story, and that a theory we can help turn into a reality. And our purpose, I suppose, and my purpose when I'm working with advisors in the market is to grow their business, to add value to their clients through independent commercial finance advice, and to give them the right solutions. And we are continually growing our advisor, database, but this doesn't ever impact on our existing relationships that we have either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do know that for you guys at ABL, you're very proud of the fact that you do things maybe a little bit different to the areas. I mean, even from their offices, if anyone check out their social media and have a look at their offices, it's very, very nice area and location they've got to work in, which is brilliant. So, I mean, obviously this year you've touched on it for yourself, Liz, really has been a big change for a lot of people, a lot of businesses. Kind of generally, what's the kind of feeling around the commercial finance world? How are things changing and evolving since what happened from March really onwards?
I mean, commercial finance has definitely changed in 2020 due to COVID-19. The introduction of the CBILS, so the coronavirus business interruption loans. But this hasn't actually changed the finance market, and it's a response to COVID-19. The real changes, I would say, have been happening since the last recession, and with the emerging of the alternative finance market and the increased amount of choice that's now out there. It's not just typical with there's one lender or there's one finance place to go to. There's lots and lots of cash available, which also means that there's also potentially more mistakes to be made as well. We find a lot at the moment that businesses kind of feel a little bit like they've had a crash course in becoming the expert. I mean, you've got Martin Lewis out there, you've got people that are sort of raising awareness of business finance, you've got the lowest rate ever, you've got the bounce backs out there, you've got the shifting of customer expectations, which no longer give guarantees. But at the same time, personal finance is not the same as business finance, and it's not comparable. I think there's a massive shift in terms of how banks are operating at the moment. I mean, some banks are saying that they're open for business, but they're open as long as the business hasn't been affected by COVID-19, which, I mean...
It's not many, is it? Let's face it.
Well, there isn't many, is there? And whether they've not been directly impacted, they potentially have been indirectly impacted.
Yep.
But it also limits the fact that customers are unable to switch banks, and it limits their access in terms of the first tier system of lending on the high street with banks if they're unable to move. So if you've got a bank out there that's effectively shut, or a bank that's no longer lending, but you're not able to move, it is restricting people's potential options. And this isn't bank bashing, by the way, in any way whatsoever. But they do also tend to categorise industries based on market performance rather than business who they are. So whether they're adapting, thriving and surviving, we need to think about them being an individual and a business in its own right, and what's it actually doing. But the biggest thing right now is that actually there's so many businesses out there that are not getting the help that they need, and there's so much cash out there, but actually the people that need it are not getting the cash.
No, I think it's interesting. I think it's one of the things from my experience of this world as well, is that actually a lot of people aren't aware of this, should we say, alternative options to funding. If a lot of people will go to their bank, whoever they bank with, get the answer is no for whatever reason, and that's kind of where it stops. They don't explore other options, or they aren't aware of other options out there. So I mean, that could be one of the big changes. You mentioned the alternative funding. Probably the best known anyone might is like Funding Circle and people like that are really well known in that area, and it's definitely changing the landscape, isn't it? I think it's really interesting how it's, from your point of view, it's not particularly this year, it's kind of the last 10 years or so that it's changing.
Definitely, yeah. And that's one of the things that we do with the partners that we work with and the introducers, is bringing the awareness to the front line. And as much as we offer the finance, we also offer the knowledge and the digital aspect of it as well. So the more that we can actually do the education element, And that's primarily kind of what I would come in and do, as opposed to like writing the finance and things like that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, continuing the theme of this year and what's gone on, what's kind of been the challenges in your world? And now, I guess probably the most obvious one is not seeing people face to face as much as you would like during the role you do. But yeah, kind of all the challenges have you seen so far this year?
I would say there's a number of challenges that people and businesses are coming up against. The cash is the massive thing, and accessing the actual cash. In terms of the actual landscape and what's actually happening, I would say there's quite a lot of myths out there, Michael, in terms of actual commercial finance. So, for example, what I've mentioned before about the personal finance and the business finance being linked together, people see it as a streamline of APR, as you would see a personal loan. But actually, when you look at a business application, it's nothing comparable. A personal element, what you're going to do is you're going to put the income in, then you're going to put the outgoing in, and you're going to come out with X. When you're looking at a business application, there's so much more variables that you need to think about. And with each individual business, you need to take that into account. And that's why at ABL, we look at everything and we consider all the considerations behind the business as well, and the workings and the forecasting and where they want to take the business to. There's lots of ways that that people can finance the business, and there's many lenders to choose from. And it's making the right choice, and in the market, finding the right sort of vehicle, but also finding the right, when you're searching for it, are you going to the right website, or are you using the right contact or the right person? And, are you using like your mate next door, or are you using an accountant, or are you using someone that you've kind of just met in, So it's getting it right and measuring that actually it's the right finance for your next business adventure. But it's actually quite hard to get it right if you don't know where to start. And without knowledge, ins and outs of the finance products available, you might choose a short-term answer, but actually it could slow down the long-term of the growth. So I think sometimes people maybe look at like the pricing element, but actually the price being lower is not necessarily the right vehicle or the right solution. And we know, don't we? It's not always the price. It's not always about the price.
It's about the value, isn't it? It's the price is only one kind of metric when looking at just about anything, isn't it? It's what you're getting from it. It's the speed of it. It's the customer service element. It's potential future growth. There's a number of things that could factor in, isn't there?
Absolutely. And of course, sometimes it can come down to price if that is what's important. You might need the cheapest rate. You might need the fastest access to funds. You might need to access a specialist lender who's more likely to lend you money at that particular point in time, or simply more options so that you're getting exactly the right finance for your business. If it's a specialised industry, you might need to access lenders across the market where you might want multiple different options to look at and variants. And you're more likely to get it if you know where to get it from.
No,
if that makes sense. But also, I think a lot of people have they've kind of got drawn into like the C-bills and the bounce back, and that they're the only sort of products that are out there, and they've kind of sort of just run with them, and the other products are still available. But there's quite a lot of myths around them as well. C-bills can be accessed for a lot of things, not just an actual loan. So you can use them for property, bridging, invoice finance as well. And you don't just have to have one, you can have multiple, and you can have a bounce back, and then you could apply for a C-bill. So it's just make sure you get the right information. And that's one thing that we just say at ABL is that if you're not sure or you're looking to explore options, is just pick up the phone and speak to us.
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
If you're sounding bored.
Absolutely. Now, something I found when all this kind of started earlier in the year is that so many people were, they've never been, you kind of touched on earlier, never really been exposed to the world of commercial finance. And, you know as well as I do, it's full of terminology that people don't use in everyday life. So it can be quite confusing to understand what the different things mean. So to be like you would in just about every other area, you would speak to an expert, and that's really, really important, I think. So I mean, I'd be really interested again talking about kind of what's gone on this year. What kind of maybe more about what people are feeling about next year and onwards. Obviously, I'm assuming you're talking to plenty of businesses. What's the kind of feeling out there? What is it? Positive, optimistic, pessimistic? What's the general thoughts?
I think it's mixed, and I think it also depends on which side of the camp you're sitting. If I'm honest.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really busy at the moment. We've got 11 acquisitions on, and we know in some cases, and again, depending on what side of the camp you're in, that's either really good or really upsetting, because normally when that's happening, it's a case of someone's selling or taking over. But for some, it's an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to develop. For some, it maybe wasn't the right time for them to be stepping away, or for some, it was the right opportunity. So there is a sensitivity element and, empathy to be had in certain aspects, but also it's kind of business as well.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is that, and I've said it before, that there's so much cash out there, it's just not getting to the right person. And there's so many people affected by it. I mean, we were talking earlier on last week, weren't we, about the White Rose Awards, and we supported the White Rose hospitality side. So there was some finalists in the restaurant awards where we kind of sat there and we were like, oh my gosh, we can't even go out to these restaurants, we can't sit, we can't call in for a drink, we can't walk through the doors. And we thought, do you know what? We supported it, we sponsored it, we watched everything all online. We've done some profile raising for some businesses, we've contacted them all, and we've made pledges to go and have, whether it's a meal or a coffee or fish and chips. And, when we back up and running and we can do as networking, or whether we can hold as events and as networking at different venues around Yorkshire, they're definitely on his list at the top points where we're going to be visiting. Yep. But if it's just a case that we're raising some awareness for them, but then Christmas is around the corner, and do we dare talk about Christmas on this call, Michael?
I hope not, no.
I mean, there's so much positives, isn't there? There's so much positives that we're seeing from businesses. The fact that there's so much funding around there that they weren't previously able to access. Let's be right. When the CBILS weren't there, they weren't able to access them. There's talks about other products coming to replace the EDF Plus, so that there will be some sort of government backing, even if the risk appetite from the banks isn't going to change. But I suppose there's key points in the calendar that people need to be thinking about for next year. Mm-hmm. So after Christmas, we've then got to think about Brexit. Can we say that?
Oh, another subject we've all tried to forget about, isn't it?
Yeah. So we've then got to think about that, though. But how's that going to impact supply chain? And I know this has been coming for the last, how many years that it's been on the table, but it's actually going to be reality in January. So actually, is everybody ready? Mm-hmm. And on the back of COVID and then coming straight into Brexit, how's things going to happen then? But then in the end of January, you've got the end of the CBIL application at the moment. So that's when those funds are then going to stop. And then you've got the job retention bonus, bonus being paid in February. So potentially a little cash injection there for some people. But then in April, we're then going to consider that the actual CBILS and the bounce back loans, the ones that started early, those payments are actually starting to be due back in. So the cycle's then starting again in terms of actually, are we restructuring? Are we looking at finance again? Are we looking at different vehicles to help with potential solutions? And it's reassessing the business every time. It's not the same where you entered in 12 months ago or 18 months ago and how did the business look then? It's how does it look now because of the impacts that have happened in December, January, February, March to get you to April.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you kind of touched on earlier, kind of common myths around finance. And I think one of the things that might come from this is that a number of people got whether the bounce back or the CBILS loan, and they probably might not have considered finance previously. They didn't want to have any finance, but they've got that. Potentially they've used it and invested that, and it's helped them grow to a certain point. And all of a sudden, you might have a number of businesses who can see the benefit of finance moving forward that maybe wouldn't have had it if it wasn't for this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be one of the kind of things that come out of all this. I think potentially that's kind of different kind of mindset, I guess, towards finance, rather than it being seen as a bit of as a negative thing for people to have finance. So quite a lot of business people did think that. It could be a big change, I think.
Yeah, I think definitely people look at finance as debt, and they look at it as bad debt. But there's good debt and there's bad debt.
Of course.
And I think it's breaking it down into that, as opposed to classing it all as bad debt. And that again is breaking down into personal and business.
Yeah.
And the common myths around that. But actually, if you look at the fact that most early stage businesses start at a grant, or part funded by a grant, and then part funded by either their own funds or from a small loan, they are all starting off with some sort of lending vehicle. So it is kind of there in early stages, anywhere up to kind of sort of between 10 and 50k. So without touching too much on it, it kind of is an element that is already there. It's just a different kind of either zero payment method, or it's, but it's kind of like a stepping stone.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that makes sense. So last question from me then, Liz, is as you know, I talk a lot about collaboration. And so for you, I'd be interested to know the type of people or the type of businesses that you collaborate with, that you want to collaborate with, and you can help us. So if there's any kind of that you could think of, that'd be great to hear.
So, I mean, we just feel like everyone should have the opportunity to speak to somebody independent, to get the best advice for their business and finances. And that, finance is right. If it's right for people, then obviously to have the conversation. The people that I speak to are advisors, so people that work closely with businesses, people that interact with them on a daily basis, that are keen to, like I say, put something into reality from theory on paper to get it into transitioning into, well, actually, I need to enter this market here, but to get from A to B, how do we get there? And like I say, it's not about talking about an actual product at this point, Michael. It's about thinking, well, actually, how do we get you from A to B? Yeah. And it's things like I say about restructuring. So are we looking to see if we can change where you are at the moment, or is it restricted? And are you looking for something more, or are you looking to change where you are now for whatever reason, but can actually we give you other options, or, within the business? But restructuring doesn't necessarily have to involve it sort of moving from banks to another bank, for example. It could be you've had a change of directorship or shareholders. Are you looking to, for example, change the actual business setup? Or are you looking to sell the business? And there's a number of things that it could require. We sometimes come across businesses that maybe, for example, are looking for funding, but they're not quite ready for it. So we work with business advisors as well that look at cost saving. So ways that they can look at lean management, consultancy and things like that. And then sometimes potentially within sort of 6 to 12 months, we can go back out to market and look at the growth elements then as well. So it isn't always right to look at something straight away for them. But what we do is we work with a team of advisors. We connect with people that share the values, like I say, they share the ethics that we have and the culture that we have here at ABL, which you're fully aware of how we work and how we operate. And we put the heart of the customer at what we do, and we treat them all as individuals. And if we identify something, whether it's on the business track or whether it's on the personal track, we make sure that they get the help and the support that they need along the business journey. And, you know, whether that's at the start or whether it's re-entering or whether it's later on down the line. So it could be anybody that we do speak to that works with businesses. And I know that sounds really fluffy, Michael, but
no, it's fine. No, it's fine, Liz. Don't worry, that's perfect. No, it's a good place to finish, because then the very last thing is, if anyone does want to get hold of you or find out more about ABL, where's the best places to go?
The best place is to visit our website, which is the ABL website, or you can contact us through LinkedIn. Or Michael, you've got our details as well, which I'm sure you're going to post for us straight after this.
Certainly have.
And then Emma, our marketing manager, is also going to share them together on our Facebook page. And then just give us a call if there's anything that anybody needs. Just give us a call and speak to us. Even if you just need to just talk anything through, or just as a sounding board, that's what we're here for. Brilliant.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Liz, for your time. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed speaking to you. And and it's great to hear all the good work I know you guys are doing. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, Liz.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, Michael.